one. Segment 3, Gold and Black Live. Stacy Clarity and Kyle Charters join me. And we promised Stacy the wind would stay down. We're not quite getting there, but this has been a delightful location, at least in terms of being outside. That's always good for me. But Stacy, Purdue, Illinois tomorrow. Big challenge for the Boilermakers heading in, and really this is, to me, is a much about a physical challenge, but also a mental challenge for this team right now.
Every game from here on out is a challenge, even though Illinois is only 1-3, and it's not exactly a scary environment there on the road. Purdue's just not playing very well right now and needs to play a lot better to win.
You look at Kyle, the injury situation, and we don't know for sure how much Markel Jones and Jawan Bentley, to name two, Jordan Roos, and you went through a whole list of them on the radio show, but this is a huge concern in terms of being able to be competitive, especially, at least the way I look at it, on that offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, I think Purdue does have a lot of injury concerns, and on a team where you don't feel like they have enough depth to sustain maybe one injury. They've got a handful of them, and the two that Daryl Hayes on his radio show last night said that were the most concerning or going to be at least a game day decision are Bentley and Jones, and arguably they're your two, if not your two best players. You're on each side. You're in the top two on each side, I think, and that would be a big loss, because I think it's a pretty significant step down from both those guys to the backups. I mean, it's hard for me to consider Purdue's offense without Markel Jones.
Yeah.
I just think, even though Brian Langford Johnson has shown some things at times, the biggest thing he's shown was against an FCS team, and he's a little bit undersized. He struggles with some of the things that freshmen struggle with as a running back, like pass protection, and we're talking about Purdue's offensive line struggling. They need somebody to pass protect a little bit. So I agree with Stacy. I think Jordan Roos will probably, give it a shot out there tomorrow, and I think Evan Panfill probably will too.
Yeah.
They're banged up, and they're banged up physically, and I don't see how what happened last week couldn't bang you up a little bit mentally too.
You can argue Markel Jones wasn't there last week.
Yeah, and that's not entirely his fault either.
No,
that line was not good at run blocking
I was going to ask you that.
But he struggled because he got knocked around and then tried to come back, and every time he's got hit and tried to come back in, he's just not the same, and he can't go any longer.
How much of it, though, last week was, watching it, and you watch it a lot closer than I do, but in terms of that, the inability to have any kind of push on the offensive line, did that doom the running game completely? From the get-go, or from your observation?
I think it's interesting. It's kind of an obvious statement, but one guy missing a block messes up a whole play.
Yeah.
And so, there were a handful of instances that I noticed, and we didn't talk about this, but where, if the pulling guy misses and everybody else looked like they were doing exactly what they were supposed to do, but that was the guy who got the tackle. I noticed that, like I said, 5 or 6 times where, whether it's a tight end or whether it's a guard or whomever, if that guy misses his block, the play was done. And so I don't know if it was a collective, if you can say collectively the offensive line didn't run block. It was a guy for this play, a guy for that play, a guy for that play, and it just added up to not being able to run block.
Purdue, and Purdue did run the ball a little bit early in that game. The first couple drives, they ran some, and then once I think Maryland figured out Purdue wasn't going to be able to pass it at all, then Purdue just couldn't run it then at that point either.
How much was it? In David Blau, obviously numbers way down last week. Was it, again, going back and looking at it, how much of that was based on protection?
All going to come back to the offensive line. For me, the whole offensive production does. And Blau got rattled early. He got pressured, and then even when he wasn't getting pressured, he was scrambling out for no reason, and it caused him to be really inaccurate. He just struggled. And I can't help but feel like it was all based on the fact that he got some pressure early. And he knew he was going to get pressure. I think before the game he was concerned about the idea that he was going to get pressure.
Which he needs to think about tomorrow as well, one would think.
Hopefully he's not thinking about it right now, though. And that's what I feel like, at this time last week, he was already feeling like this was going to be a bad day for him in the pocket. And hopefully they've been able to put the package together this week that makes him feel a little bit more comfortable.
Well, and when the throws were there, he didn't make them too.
Yeah.
So he wasn't accurate. And part of that is because of what Kyle was talking about. You get rattled and you maybe don't set your feet like, he's had a problem with, not setting his feet and those kind of things. But there were guys who were open, and when they were open, he wasn't able to connect with them, I think, because of this whole bigger picture.
in the 4 years or close to that we've been around Daryl Hazel, Daryl Hazel seems to be the same guy that we saw on December the 6th or whatever the date was, 2012 was it, and as he is on October the 7th, 2016. How do you think he's dealing? We've asked him the question about the pressure of winning and getting this program turned around. We're going to see Daryl that way till we don't see him anymore, I suppose.
Yeah, he, like you said, I mean, he's outwardly going to be the same person whether they win or lose. I mean, we've talked, I've gone in there Monday for the last however many years, after those games, and just talking to him on Monday, you usually don't know. You wouldn't have known what just had happened. I do think that even though he's not saying, it's pressure, I'm stressed out, because he can't, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he can't say that.
Yeah.
I'm sure there is some of that, I'm sure you are stressed out, and as much as you say you want to block out kind of all the stuff that's going around, I mean, even at his radio show, he got 2 calls last night, only 2, and both of them were about, job security and the program and those kind of things. I mean, you just can't escape it, nor should he be able to. But it's got to be wearing on him, and I don't know, but I do know this about him. He will keep coaching, he will keep working, he will keep pushing his guys. I mean, he's certainly not going to quit. That's just not in him.
Yeah, from that standpoint, I would agree with that. You guys are in practice every day and watching at least Tuesday and Wednesday, I should say. Any other signs of just any change in approach or a feeling that you're seeing something that's a little bit different from a psychological standpoint?
Coaches were getting after him this week, I think.
Yeah.
I was plugging my ears.
Because they were using bad words.
There are a lot of them.
Yeah.
They don't usually do that, but they were, they've been getting after him a little bit, which they need something. Not sure how much that affects things on Saturdays. I asked Ross Ells if I felt like they were thudding people up a little bit more this week. Mm-hmm. He said they weren't, but
thudding up. What do you mean?
Like simulated tackling, like a little bit more physical. I mean, not bringing guys to the ground, but wrapping them a little bit. I thought they were doing that a little bit more maybe this week. Not a lot, but a little bit. So, maybe trying to just get a little bit more physical, which could help them. But other than that, though, I didn't notice a whole lot.
No, I mean, there are a couple things that I was talking to Kyle about. One player, dropped a ball against air, and then he got another snap, dropped it again, and they obviously benched him. But I didn't see him do any up downs. I didn't see anybody get into his face and say, hey, listen, buddy, this is not acceptable. That bothered me a little bit. I don't know if that's symptomatic of anything, but that stood out to me. I want that kid on his own, which they do have kids that do this. You miss a pass or something like that, they're down and they're punishing themselves, doing up downs or push-ups or whatever. And this kid dropped a couple balls and just kind of, he was clearly frustrated. You could see him like, geez, But then there was nothing. And that bothers me. I want somebody in your face to be like, hey, listen, this is not right. And they have guys, and we've seen that. Bilal Marshall has been a very vocal guy, even though he's not a captain. He huddled, was it Tuesday after practice that he huddled up the offense and really got after him after practice. So they have some guys like that, but you'd just like to see the players, and it was a young player too, you'd like to see them maybe be a little bit more accountable, or I don't know.
Self-accountable.
Yeah.
And Daryl Hazel talked about DeJuan Hunt and getting into this is last during the game, making sure that the offense doesn't give up, so to speak. How much do you see of that?
We have a story we can't just.
I don't know whether I want to tell this story in this form. Really, we did print it in the Golden Black Express, but in a limited fashion, in the depth chart.
Oh.
Did you read it?
Yeah. Go ahead. There was a player who. This is a bad TV segment right here.
I'm not fully invested in a drill. I just, we saw a player on Wednesday, right, not be as invested, I felt like, in the drill and sort of pull himself out of it. And I don't like to see that. To me, that's a sign that you're struggling with frustration, after the loss, and that I understand. Certainly you got beat badly, but you've got to be able to, especially by Wednesday, I think, got to be able to to try and get back in there, and because this is a game that you've really got to win this game. If you don't, maybe you win a couple of games here or there down the stretch. I don't know, but if you lose this one, it's going to be tough to get back to what you thought you were going to be this year. Now, their goals were West Division champion. That was a little out there, but I think more reasonably a goal would have been to get to 6 wins. But if you lose this week, so I just think you got to have guys fully invested all the time.
Scenarios and down to our last minute or two here. Scenarios where Purdue does win tomorrow. Obviously, Daryl Hazel talked about the absolute necessity of stopping the run.
Right.
Something that they didn't do, the Boilermakers, in almost record proportion last week. How much, I was going to ask you, in your film with Freeman Marcus, Freeman talked about 6 plays accounting for 200 yards, which is pretty much true if you just look what Ty Johnson did. How much do you lay into that? Is it Marcus didn't make it simple, but is it as simple as just making those plays, and you can all of a sudden you can have a serviceable run defense? It thus gives Purdue a chance tomorrow.
Well, I think his point was more that 6 plays is too many.
Okay.
Like if you have 1 or 2, you're still ticked off, but there certainly should not be 6.
Yeah.
I think my biggest concern with the run defense, specifically what Daryl Hazel has talked about, run fits. We might have talked about this on the radio show today, are they really changing their assignments so much from week to week that the guys don't understand the changes and that's why they're messing up? Or is it, they're in different coverages and they're in different fits and different coverages and maybe it's too much for them? I mean, I guess that's my concern is, okay, if they don't get this defense, then make it simpler. Are we at the point where you just need to make it simpler? I don't know, because clearly part of this is just inability to tackle and physical limitations, but that's not what one of those plays, maybe you could say that, but the other ones, they just weren't even in the vicinity of guys.
They couldn't tackle with Greg Hudson's defense either.
Right.
So
That's been a problem. No question.
He could pull up the tape from one of our other shows the last few years and
said the same thing.
And we've said the same thing. So I'm not sure. We have our issues with the scheme sometimes, and putting all those DBs on the field, and what we feel like still, or what I feel like, I speak for myself, is still running opportunities for the offense, regardless of what the matchup tells you. But ultimately, the players got to make some plays too, and I just feel like physically sometimes Purdue is not where it needs to be to be able to make all those plays.
All right, well, predictions will be on the site here shortly. Do not see good things for Purdue tomorrow, I assume. I do not. 31-17 Illinois is the way I looked at it.
I picked Illinois as well.
I got Illinois. I just can't bring myself to pick Purdue after the loss, and then having the injuries this week. I don't know.
Is it a 4-quarter game?
Better be.
Yeah, I've got it close enough to be into the 4th quarter. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, there you go, and there you have it. Go to the site to see those predictions and much more. If you missed part of this show, Vince Edwards and Matt Painter early on, or you want to rewatch this fine segment, please do so. We want to thank all the folks from Paul and Gordon and the folks at WLFI, all the help that it's been the road show here of late. We're going to be next week at Bruno's with the 50-year Rose Bowl team, and hope to have Bob Greasy and some others on the show. But we want to thank also Matt Painter and Vince Edwards and Chris Foreman for putting that together. We want to thank the buses for driving by. But we really thought it was a lot of fun to be out here today in front of this great statue, and everybody but Stacy thought it was a lot of fun. So it was good from that.
I'm the only one who has hair.
That's true. I don't have enough hair for it to matter. So we want to thank our sponsors, XXX, Hilton Garden Inn, John Basham, and the good folks at Basham Rental, and of course State Farm agent Trent Johnson. We'll see you next week, normal time, 2 p.m. live. I know we're going to be at Bruno's, and we'll have a fun show next week as we look ahead to the Purdue homecoming matchup against Iowa. Have a great week, everybody, and we'll see you next week on Gold and Black Live.